In the ancient lands nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates, where civilization first learned to write its stories, a different kind of tale was whispered on the wind. It wasn't written on clay tablets or carved into stone monuments. This was the story of the river, of the reeds, and of the woman who seemed to be born from both. They called her Lamashtu, not the demon goddess of the great cities, but a woman of the river settlements, a figure as real and as mysterious as the shifting currents of the water itself. Air, Name, Mianxi, of the river wind. And it was a fitting title. You would see her moving along the banks at dusk, when the sun bled orange and purple into the sky and the water turned to glass. She had a lean, sinewy build, the kind of strength that comes not from lifting heavy stones, but from a life of constant motion, like the river she walked beside. Her hair was long and dark, a coarse, untamed curtain that the wind loved to play with, tossing it about her angular face. Her skin, a median earth tone, was weathered by the sun, matte and dry, telling a story of countless days spent under the Mesopotamian sky. The elders would watch her from the firelit doorways of their mud-brick homes. They'd see her wide-set eyes, with their heavy lower lids, staring out at the water, and they would wonder, was she a guardian, a spirit, or just a woman who understood the river better than anyone else? The children, bold and curious, would sometimes try to follow her, but she moved with a quiet purpose that was hard to keep up with. She was always alone, her only companion the rustling of the reeds and the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Her home, if you could call it that, was a small, temporary shelter woven from the very reeds she gathered. It was barely more than a windbreak, a place to rest out of sight. She wore simple, woven garments, layers of cloth in muted, earthy colors held together with simple bindings. There was no adornment, no jewelry, nothing to mark her as wealthy or powerful in the way the city dwellers measured such things. Her power was of a different kind. It was said that Lamashtu could read the river like a scribe reads a tablet. She knew when the floods were coming, not by measuring the water level, but by the scent of the air and the behavior of the fish. She knew which reeds were best for weaving baskets, which mud would make the strongest bricks, and which herbs growing along the bank could soothe a fever or mend a wound. The village communities, though wary of her solitary nature, came to rely on her unspoken wisdom. A fisherman might leave a portion of his catch near her shelter, a silent offering of thanks for a tip about a hidden deep pool teeming with fish. A mother might leave a small loaf of bread, grateful for the poultice of river herbs that had cooled her child's fever. They never spoke to her directly, and she never acknowledged the gifts with words. It was a silent, symbiotic relationship, a dance of respect and necessity between the settled community and the wild woman of the river. But there were darker whispers, too. Some said she was the cause of misfortune. If a fishing boat capsized in a sudden squall, some would look towards her stretch of the riverbank with suspicion. If a child wandered too close to the water's edge and disappeared, her name would be muttered in hushed, fearful tones. They said the river wind that followed her could carry away the breath of a newborn or sour the milk. In a motheress breast, she was both a source of aid and an object of fear, embodying the dual nature of the river itself, a force that gives life and can just as easily take it away. One particular story that survived the ages tells of a great drought. The Tigris grew sluggish and shallow, the fields cracked, and the date palms withered. The people prayed to their city gods, made offerings, and waited for relief that didn't come. As desperation turned to despair, the village elders decided to approach Lamashtu. They found her, not by her shelter, but standing knee-deep in the middle of the shrinking river, her hands sifting through the thick, exposed mud. She didn't look up as they approached. She simply spoke, her voice raspy like dry leaves. "The river is sleeping," she said. "Its heart is buried." She then began to walk, not along the bank, but upstream, following a path only she could see. The elders and a few brave villagers followed. For a day and a night, she led them, until they reached a place where a small, forgotten tributary was choked with fallen rocks and debris from a long-ago landslide. It was a place no one had thought to look. The main flow of the river had been diverted, slowly starving the lands downstream. Lamashtu pointed with a long, slender finger. "Here," she said. "Wake the river." And with that she turned and walked back the way she came, her form eventually disappearing into the haze of the heat-drenched landscape. The villagers, galvanized by her certainty, set to work. It took them days of back-breaking labor, but they cleared the blockage. And then a trickle became a stream, and the stream became a surge. As the lifeblood of the river was restored, the water flowed back down to their settlement, filling the irrigation channels and reviving the parched earth. When they returned, they sought her out, carrying offerings of the finest grain and woven cloth, the best their grateful community could provide. But she was gone. Her reed shelter was dismantled, and there was no sign of her along the riverbank. It was as if she had dissolved back into the landscape. Her purpose served. They never saw Lamashtu of the river wind again, but her story became a permanent part of their oral history. She became more than a woman. She became a myth, a cautionary tale, and a symbol of hope. She represented the untamable spirit of nature, the deep, intuitive knowledge that exists outside the walls of cities and the pages of scholarly texts. To the people of the river valley, she was a reminder that the world was full of forces they didn't understand, forces that could be both beneficial and dangerous. She taught them to respect the river, not just as a resource, but as a living entity with a will of its own. Her legacy wasn't carved in stone, but it was etched into the collective memory of the people, passed down from one generation to the next around the flickering light of their fires. Her name carried forever on the river wind. Thanks for watching. If you're fascinated by the hidden stories and forgotten myths of our world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We have many more journeys into the past to share with you.